Hello and welcome to this week's show, proudly sponsored by ZeroFit, the king of base layers. Before we get started, I just want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you who watches and subscribes to the show. You're a massive part of us gaining MotoGP accreditation for the British Grand Prix this coming weekend. We can't wait to get down there, bring you some great content just as we did from World Superbikes, which I know you enjoyed. So make sure you like and subscribe and we'll keep that content coming. My guest this week is the 1995 250cc British champion who went on to race Grand Prix at 250 level. He raced British Superbikes, British Supersport and tried his hand at the Isle of Man TT before making his home in America and developing his MotoGeo YouTube channel. That's Jamie Robinson. This is Off Track, the motorcycle racing podcast. Jamie, welcome to Off Track. What an absolute pleasure, mate. So good to see you. How are you?
Nice one, buddy. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your awesome show.
Oh, mate, it's been, what, 15 months in the making since we were at Kota?
Yeah.
And you were walking out of Alpine Stars for breakfast. I'm like, Jesus, I didn't expect to see you. It's been so long.
Yeah.
How have you been? What's new? How's life?
Yeah, I guess since a lot of people saw me, I did the Isle of Man TT in 2008. Then I flew to America, Los Angeles on a 3-week holiday. And I never came back. So my life took a massive U-turn there. And I'm still involved in motorcycles. I stopped racing and got involved with picking up a camera and then a bit of journalism, traveling. And realistically, I've been involved in motorcycling for such a long time. And I wasn't, I couldn't stop racing, but I needed to. It was like one of those things. I was kind of getting slower. I was running my own team. It was tough. And quite a lot of the time I wasn't enjoying it. And that's why I started racing, is because I loved motorcycles. So my dad said, it was my dad really. My dad said, okay, I've had enough. My dad was basically worked with me as my mechanic and everything to do with motorcycles growing up. And then when my dad just said, I've had enough. And at that point I was like, you know what? So have I. And then I met Milky Quail and the Isle of Man TT came on my radar. And I took the opportunity to do it because that's why I started racing. I know a lot of people don't know that, and but basically my dad took me to the Isle of Man TT when I was 7 years old on the back of that motorcycle there, the BSA Gold Star, and sat me in a graveyard with a cup of tea and a piece of cake and said, watch this, basically. And I was hooked ever since. And we went across to the Isle of Man to watch the TT when I was 7, 8, 9, 10. And then when I was 11 my dad started racing it. And then he did the Manx Grand Prix on his BSA Gold Star. So I went to the Isle of Man when I was 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, going with my dad and my dad racing it. And then that's why I really started racing, is because I just wanted to race the Isle of Man TT. So when I started racing, my career, it just happened to actually take off a little bit, and I got hooked on 250s and focusing on 250 Grand Prix. And at that point, the TT is way off your radar.
Yeah.
And then I came back to the British Championship, and then I, racing against people like John McGuinness, and they're going over to the TT and having a great time, and then coming back. And I don't know, the TT just kind of crept back in a bit. And then, when I signed up to do it, I just thought to myself, no one can learn this track. Like, it's so long. How can you learn this track? So that was my kind of goal, try and learn. But one thing I got out of it most at the Isle of Man TT was my love for motorcycling again.
Yeah.
So my passion that I was struggling with and why I was doing it, good grief, the Isle of Man just blew the barn doors off everything and was just like, I loved motorcycles again.
It's difficult when you fall out of love with it, isn't it? We speak to a lot of racers that you know why you start racing. You know why your dad started racing. We know why your peers started racing, because it's riding motorcycles really quickly in circles. But when that love disappears, whether it be through circumstance, through injury, with things out of your control, all of a sudden you find it really hard to find the love for it.
Yeah, yeah. It's, for me, I was in the game for 19, 20 years, So lots of ups and downs, and more downs than ups, really. And motorcycling is like that, sports like that. But there's only so many downs you can take. And I was financially like up to my neck in it, running my own team, trying to keep all the sponsors going, and da 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 da. So, you know, it took a lot of fun out of it before I even got on track. And then I was running my own team. You know, my dad didn't like me crashing. It was costing money.
The most expensive part of racing is crashing.
Yeah, but, you know, you end up not riding as hard because you can't.
Yeah.
You know, financially you can't afford it. And that's not a reason to go racing, because it was never on my radar when I was younger. I didn't care. You know what I mean? I didn't
Worst thing a mechanic can say to a rider when you go out, don't crash it.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. No, but you know, I've even had that in Grand Prix. You know, I had that from Hervé Poncharal. He was like, dude, we'll give you this ride, but don't crash it.
So I'm not going to show my potential.
Yeah. Well, you can't.
Because you're riding within yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So take me back to the early days on the 125s on the British circuit. We'll try and do this as chronologically as possible, but we'll jump backwards and forwards and we'll tangent and whatever.
Sure.
Because I don't think I've ever seen you on a podcast before, other than
I haven't
other
done
than
one. This is my
MotoGeo.
first one.
We get a few like that.
Yeah.
Because it's important to tell the story. And when I put it out, as I said to you earlier, when I put it out on the socials that I was coming over to see you, so many people were absolutely buzzing that you were here and we're going to get a chance to sit down. They're like, oh my, brilliant. There's so many stories, so many people that come back, and you know, everybody knows how talented you are, stroke were. Because I don't like using the past tense. Everybody knows. Hodgie retweets it on Twitter going, Jamie was rapping. And it proved that you're a British 250 champion in 96. 95, sorry. And that's good. I didn't want to look down. Yeah. I'm doing my best. But going back to 95, and Stalker was on the Paget's bike. You were on the Aprilia.
Yeah.
It was the height of 250 racing, but you kind of cut your teeth on the 125s and really made your name for yourself in the early 90s there.
Yeah. Well, 125s was the first bike I got for club racing. And I went through the club racing thing, and then my dad just threw me in at the deep end and got me into the British Championship. And, you know, all my heroes were there then, plus a lot of kids, or not necessarily kids, but kids that were a few years older than me, who were rapid. And that was like Neil Hodgson, James Hayden. And they were also like great inspiration, because I was younger and they were doing it before me. So it was, you know, whether I thought I could do it or I had the speed, I was going to try. And so, you know, 125s was a great place to cut your teeth. Just like you said, learn the circuits, learn, you know, your speed. But one of the biggest things was also getting over to Spain when I was young too, because that was another level. It was another level. So you rode against those guys, you learned a lot. You might have been at the back of the field, but you learned a lot. And every time I came back to England, I was a bit better. And a bit better, and a bit better.
Ducados Open and stuff
exactly.
and things like that.
That's when Dirk Rowdies was winning the World Championship and then doing the Spanish Championship at the same time, because it paid so much prize money if you could win it. And, you know, so you're racing against top level guys, top level bikes. And that was when, you know, those guys just rode a little different. You know, just things like using the curbs. Like everyone in England, just the curb was maybe something that a car used, or if you only used if you ran wide.
Yeah.
In Spain, it was part of the racetrack, and so it was something that I came back with and started doing. You know, and you just learn little bits like that. So it was great traveling. I was very lucky. My dad and I like literally just raced and drove around Europe and did the European Championship and the Spanish Championship. You know.
Go on.
Yeah, but the 125, I probably stayed on the 125 a year too long. I didn't need to be on it long to jump on a 250. My second year on the 125, it was a total disaster. You know, I just crashed and crashed and crashed and crashed.
I'm going to say why.
We didn't have much budget. We didn't have, the bike was only so good, the suspension was only so good, and I was overriding everything. You know, so a lot of crashing and a lot of disappointment. So, you know, but, you know, learning at the same time, you don't realize how much you're learning when you're young like that too. So always against, you know, good guys, the fastest guys in the UK at the time was like Robin Appleyard and Steve Patrickson.
Yeah.
And they'd just come from Grand Prix. So you weren't you were racing against really talented guys, you know. So I learned a lot in those early years.
It's a lot to bring you on at that age as well, isn't it? We had a wealth of talent in those days that had been to GPs and come back, like you say, with the guys you met, like Robin Appleyard and Steve Patrickson, just the other side of the 62, both of them.
Yeah.
And you then have it. We don't have that now.
No.
It was a completely different time. And that's why we produced the riders that we did. And kind of we're not producing the riders that we should do now. We've got super talented riders, but they're not going to follow the trajectory that you did, that Norge did, that Chaz did, and go off into the middleweight class of GP.
Yeah. Well, you know, there was a feeder class because we were doing it. We were doing it in British Championship, we were doing it in European Championship, we were doing it in Spanish Championship, and
all eyes were on you, weren't they?
Yeah, that was the same machinery pretty much. You know, 125, 250 Grand Prix bikes, and once that class has gone, it's difficult. It's difficult for the Brit. It's always has been since the 80s. I think 70s and 80s they were picking British riders to ride factory bikes coming to England, weren't they? But you know, it's gone away from the UK. There's a lot of eyes on Spain and Italy.
It makes it very difficult now. As I say, we don't have the same machinery. We don't have a Moto 2 class. We have.
It's a shame.
We do, but we don't because it's not the same level.
No.
And it's more down to production racing. But you had those prototype bikes that you were kind of like Boz, Sorf, Mara, Wolsey Coulter, Alan Carter, made for a 250.
Yeah.
There was never. I don't think there was ever a better fit than you guys, and you're in amongst those names as well. To ride 250s.
Yeah. I learned so much in my first 250 year. I couldn't believe it. I can remember being at Alton Park and getting on a 250 for the first time, and I couldn't believe how fast Mara and Boz and all of those guys were. I was just, what have I done? You know, getting off this 125. And then, you know, but I learned a lot in those early days. They were really talented riders, you know, and just, you know, at the time, heroes to me, just like, you know, Alan Carter and Bozzy and Mara were just on a pedestal, you know. They could ride, they looked cool, and they were fucking fast, you know. And so I loved, and I was really lucky as well in those early days. I didn't care. I was knocking on their motorhome doors and asking them what gear they were in on. What gear are you in? Looking at their gear in, and they were like, fuck off, Jamie. But, you know, I was cheeky enough at the time. I was only had really working with my dad, and you know, I was just always knocking on, I think, Boz's door more than anything. Really, he had a bit of time.
He was the boy, wasn't he?
Yeah, he had a bit of time for me, thankfully. But yeah, great times.
He at the end, he was brilliant on the podcast that we did with him back earlier in the year. It was a real. We're only halfway through his story, up to the point where he finished at Foggy Petronas, and then it was like, time was up against us, so we've still got another couple of hours to do with Boz. But listening to his stories of the days of 250s, that the camaraderie was there, but the on track battles were legendary. It's a class that is still sorely missed.
Yeah, I remember a lot of, you know, very similar to the TT. You know, you wouldn't, if you could help a team or whatever, or a rider to some degree, you would do it. And then you just get on track and bash it out on track, you know. But I don't know, they were really special times.
What are your best memories from those 250 days? British Championship?
Well, I loved 95 when I was just, you know, racing hard with my dad, and we didn't have much money. And we had a real bitzer of a motorcycle that we were trying to learn how to work and keep going. And it was a tough year, you know. I got my first win that year, and then went on to win the championship, and it was just, you know, crazy year. We were all over Europe, trying to race Europe, trying to improve the bike, trying to learn about the bike, and then Newton and Walker were my biggest rivals that year, including Jason Vincent, actually.
Oh, Jay was there as well, wasn't he? Yeah.
But Jason's bike probably wasn't as good, so he was, you know, his bike wasn't as quick as Ian Newton's or Chris Walker's, so it wasn't probably fair for Jay that year that it wasn't a proper battle, but I got to battle with him later on in the World Championship, and you know, Jay was another great rider. As far as my best memories of that, I'd say probably 94, just learning all about a 250 and badgering Mara and Bozzy and Alan Carter for tips, really. And then having a go in 95 myself and finding out I could do this.
There was a big battle with Chris Walker, wasn't it, that year in Newt?
Yeah.
Chris was on the Paget's bike, if I remember.
That's right. Yeah. It was I don't think it was set in stone who was going to win. You know, I got off to a good start. Then Newton came through, and Walker was there all frigging year. And then I came good at the end and snatched it. So it was, it wasn't a foregone conclusion.
Newt had a huge amount of experience as well, didn't he? He's still going now with his IN competition team.
Yeah, he was a class rider. He just really stepped down from Grand Prix, really. And his bike was good, and he knew how to ride, and he was a clean rider, very precise, tough to beat.
Who wasn't a clean rider, Jamie?
Probably me.
I wasn't leading it that way.
I don't know. I'll just throw it out there. Because if I don't, I'd rather the comments go, no, he was clean. No.
Somebody's going to come back and go, no, he was fine. Everybody said you were rapid. Nobody said you were dirty.
No, I tried never to be dirty, actually, you know, because you only get paid back. Racing's
usually twice.
Racing has a way of that happening. Whatever you did to somebody else usually happens to you sooner or later.
This was the conversation I had with Boz and Alan Carter when it was like, okay, is that where the lines are? Then that's how we'll play.
Yeah.
And that's
Gloves
what
off.
led to their incident in the paddock at Brands that's on the Boz show. When you won the title in 95, the step was kind of set then for GPs as far as you could go. The kind of everybody's think that the planets are aligning. This is where it needs to be. It's rapid on the 250. We'd said with the boys that were going to go as well with Norge and Chaz later on, but that was the route. What was the story behind getting into 250 GPs?
Very tough, and you're paying your way. And then when you get there, it's not like Moto2 and Moto3 now where all the engines are the same, all the tyres are the same. And really it's down to the rider, I think. And it's a real fair, level playing field now. It didn't used to be like that. There were many layers of 250s. So it started off with a factory bike, and then the factory bikes from last year, which they leased out. And then you get kitted bikes. So Honda and Yamaha would have factory bikes and A kits.
Yep.
So there was a lot in the field in different categories. And then I was on a privateer, so almost like a kitted Yamaha or a kitted Honda. But I did a bit too well on it in my first couple of Grand Prix, and I upset the next rank up, and my bike was never the same after that. So it was, I should have taken my time, and I was hasty, I was really pushing. I think my first Grand Prix I was 9th, and then I got punted off the track with a few laps to go, and I think I ended up 11th or something. Next Grand Prix I was up there, but the bike seized, and then they took my ECU off my bike and flashed it, and it never was the same again. It just seized all year. And I really struggled through that year. I had a couple of decent results. I managed to get 3 9th places. But, the difference between my bike and, let's just say, another kitted Aprilia or semi-factory Aprilia, and then the factory bikes is huge. And then, tyre-wise, we get a different allocation. So I'd never get what top riders were getting. So, it's very difficult to compete on an uncompetitive bike when you've got less grip and less speed and less acceleration and old equipment, and then still try and prove your worth. But I tried, and I got in the top 10 a few times, but it wasn't what I set out to achieve,
How do you deal with that as a young rider trying to achieve that goal of at the time, 500cc Grand Prix racing? Because that was the pinnacle with Doohan and Schwantz and Rainey and everybody else. You pushing that forward to that was the dream. But the kit's not there and the opportunities aren't there. But you and your dad busting your balls within the teams to get there, but then being penalised for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was at the time, it was set out in stone who was top on factory bikes, and a lot of money was going in. You either had to be Max Biaggi, or Ralph. In fact, even Ralph Waldman brought the Marlboro money, and even Max did. He brought a lot of sponsorship into teams. You really had to bring money into teams. It's no different now. Moto2 riders, Moto3 riders, they're paying a lot of money for those slots. I know it doesn't look like it, but you know, it's a business.
You're not telling me that most of the Moto2 field are on wages. That's definitely not the case.
Yeah, absolutely not.
It's the same principle now.
Absolutely.
And that's always been, I think, the spectre of racing. I think you found that early in the 90s, as we said, that the biggest drawback for our homegrown talent to go racing was the lack of budget. It wasn't a lack of talent.
No, absolutely not. I fully believe that. You know, like, just look at what Cal Fogarty did when he jumped on that Honda for a few races that Pier Francesco Chili, I think, was injured, and he just jumped on that. Amazing. Then he jumped on the Cagiva and had an amazing result at Donington, and that's him just turning up at one or two race meetings and having incredible results. Imagine what they could do if he had some time. So, you know, all those riders for me, Cal Fogarty, Jamie Whittam, all had the talent to go to Grand Prix and be very successful. And other riders are also, you know, like John Reynolds turned up at 500 Grand Prix.
Yes.
And we all know how many titles John Reynolds had won. And unfortunately, when he got to Grand Prix on it, you can only do so much on an uncompetitive bike. But we all had this dream. I said to John, what are you doing here? Finishing at, you know, 15th or whatever. And he's like, well, I always wanted to race in the 500 World Championship, you know. It's a dream. It's where it's the pinnacle of the sport in so many ways, you know.
Of course it is. In the nicest possible way, everybody wants to be a MotoGP rider.
Yeah.
That's why you set out. You have that dream. You adjust it as you go.
Yeah.
So you might want to be British champion or European champion.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you want to be world champion because that's why you go racing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But having the kit to do that has been the hardest.
I'm now friends with Max Biaggi, and he says to me, he kind of laughs at my 250s that I rode, because he's just like, dude, it's like turning up a gunfight with no bullets, is how he put it.
But then why didn't the talent take you forward then? Because the results were obviously, it was clear that you were outperforming where you should have been. It's like know your role kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I got a chance then to join, you know, looking back, I had chances to join good teams, but, you know, for whatever reason, I chose other teams. In fact, my sponsors sometimes chose for me. But when I jumped on the 250 Suzuki, we had two deals on the table. One was a 250 factory Suzuki, and one was a kitted Honda with TSR. And like, TSR, man. But factory Suzuki sounds good, and the sponsors that I had, the Virgin at the time, were like Suzuki. But, you know, the bike was pretty uncompetitive and the team was pretty bad. So, you know, I could only do so much there too, you know. And then once you've had a couple of bad years in World Championship, you really don't get much of a chance again, you know. And my best results up until then had just been a handful of top 10, you know.
What were your best memory? I know in fact, just to change that question, if you'd had someone like Roger Burnett or Bob Moore or Carlo Panat looking after you, do you think things would have been different? If you'd had a manager?
I didn't, look, my dad took me racing when I was really young. He's an enthusiast through and through, but he's a construction worker, he's a builder, right? So we didn't know the racing game. Neither did I, you know, young kid, fresh out of high school, racing motorcycles, not very well educated, really, looking back. And, you know, I made some mistakes. And, you know, it's a small family. It's a small paddock. You can't make too many mistakes. You only get so many chances. So, you know, I guess I just ran out of chances. I don't know.
What are your best memories from back there? Get the negative stuff done now. What are your best memories from being in the 250 GP paddock? 250 that you can tell me.
Yeah. I could tell you a few good stories about Anthony Gobert, but we'll leave them for another day.
Tell me one.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have many fond memories of 250 Grand Prix because I was just young and determined, and I wasn't going where I wanted to go. My results weren't where I wanted them to be.
That's
fair. But I'd say, excuse me, probably racing in Jerez. The crowd in Jerez was unbelievable, and just a fantastic to be able to, a privilege to race in front of so many people. racing at Mugello, fantastic circuits like Mugello, just a dream come true, you know. Being a part of it, trying to live your dream. I mean, I was still on the way up. I still was determined. I was still pushing forward, you know, but I was a long way from where I wanted to be in 250s, you know. I genuinely felt like I had enough talent to be up there with them, you know. And but I don't know, I think I really enjoyed the 250 Grand Prix in 2000 when it rained and I had a chance to show my talent then, you know. And that was good. That was a hot minute. But you know, it's all good. I mean, I was doing always what I loved to do, which was racing motorcycles and being on the 250. I didn't even have the dream to be 500 world champion. I just wanted to be 250 world champion. I was obsessed.
But it had credibility back then.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, and not taking too much away from a Moto2 world champion, but now it's a stepping stone class.
Mm.
Back then, you had guys that did almost their whole career in 125s, and some that did almost their whole career in 250s.
It's really true.
And they were world champions in their own right, not a stepping stone world. And I'm not being derogatory to Pecco and to Remy Gardner, people like that. They are world champions in their own right, but it was always on the way to something.
Yeah.
Whereas like Cito Pons and people like that would carry on and carry on. Max Biaggi, 4-time 250 world champion.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody's so keen to move on now.
Yeah.
One of the questions I was going to ask, while you were doing the 250 GPs, as difficult as it was and as determined as you was at that time, did you have the chance to actually be in the moment and just to understand where you were at any point? Or was it forever drive?
Yeah, no, never. I'd never had enough experience, I think, at that time to just, you know, stand back and look at the bigger picture. I was too in the now. Yeah. And again, that's just experience. I think if I'd have had somebody with experience around me who'd done it before, might have been able to help out. But I was too in the now, which was either a good result or a bad result or getting over an injury, pretty much.
Where are we next?
Yeah. Which racetrack and how injured am I? You know, how all of those things, really.
One thing that when you were doing the 250, same as Boz, and throughout your career, really, you've always presented yourself in your own individual way with the hand-painted helmets and everything is your style.
Yeah.
Where did the inspiration for all that come from?
First, being a young kid doing motocross and getting the American motocross magazines. And they were riding in sunny weather with the coolest helmets. And I was riding in boggy mud, you know, with standard stuff. And I could never afford a custom helmet paint job. So I started painting my own.
But why not?
You know, that's where it came from. And then, so it all started in Supercross because they wore the hilarious colours. And so I kind of brought some of that to my road racing. And then in road racing, John Kaczynski, I loved his crash helmet and his setup.
I can picture it now.
Yeah, and Nigel Bosworth, same in the UK, just a cool helmet and looked cool on the motorcycle. So yeah, it was always inspiration for me to, do something a bit different.
And then Josh Brooks still does that now with the motocross helmets with the RIs.
Right.
And Rich Stevens, Rich Art Concepts, always helmets based on like 80s and 90s American supercross riders.
Yeah.
People I've never heard of, sadly, because I've never followed the dirt side. Mm-hmm. Although I did brush shoulders with Ricky Carmichael at the TT, which people were going mad for. I'm like, cool, that's Ricky Carmichael.
Yeah.
Nice guy.
Yeah.
But apparently he's the goat of supercross.
Yeah, he's the guy who's actually won more races than anybody else in the outdoor and the supercross combined.
Again, I know he was he was a really big deal, but I didn't know an awful lot about him.
Yeah, he changed the game really. Everyone was having fun and drinking on a weekend and partying. And he came along and he was training, flat out, changed the game.
And this is how we're going to do it from now on. When the decision, well, how did the decision come about then to come back to the UK to race BSB? Or what happened in the interim?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so England wasn't so fussed about me going to 250 Grand Prix. It was really difficult to get any sponsors and a budget together to leave the UK. And when I spoke to anybody in the UK, they just wanted to spend their money in the British Championship and at the TT
Exposure.
And let's just say, for example, let's just say Pirelli.
Yeah.
Well, Pirelli, I'm in the UK. You go to Pirelli UK. I'm not going to Pirelli Europe or it's Pirelli UK, and they're just fixated on the British Championship and the TT. Fair dues, but it doesn't help me go to 250 Grand Prix. So I found it very difficult to get backing to go to 250 Grand Prix, and like I said, you had to take money with you. And even back in the 90s, it was like 100 grand plus. And where are you going to get 100 grand plus from some UK sponsors? And I was lucky. I was really lucky the first couple of years. Managed to get it together, got some sponsors together, and it, somehow made it work. But it was always, it was much easier to get a ride in the UK. So when I finally did it, I didn't realize how much of a big step it was coming off a production, a race bike onto a production bike. I didn't realize how much of a step it was going to be getting off a 250 two-stroke onto a 1000cc four-stroke. I had no idea. I'd never ridden one. I just knew that I could race and I'd figure it out. Looking back, I should have done a lot more or any kind of testing on any big bike leading up to it just to get a feel for it. But I didn't. And then once we started racing, it was really difficult for me to just kind of like get a feel for the motorcycle, really. And get a feel for, like, my strength has always been corner entry and corner speed, not necessarily really getting on the gas. And I had to really start to learn a different way to approach it. And I couldn't, because I'd only known one way. It was really hard for me to stop rushing into corners.
Yeah.
Because that's what I did, and that's where I usually made my time up on people. So hard thing to take your superpower away and not have one. And every rider has a superpower, right? I mean, every rider, well, I say it's his superpower, a little skill that he does better than, and mine was corner entry. I always had a good feeling for the front tire. And now it was taken away from me. It never went anywhere I wanted it to go, right? So if I couldn't go into a corner, I couldn't get out of it either.
No.
And I think I would have got there on the Ducati if I'd have had a bit of time, but I never really got that time. And then I came to British Superbike with GSE. They didn't like the fact that I wasn't up to speed quick enough, so I got kicked out of that team. And then I was really, careful what I was going to do next then. And then I got an opportunity to fit in as a replacement rider at 250 Grand Prix for a couple of races, did that, finished in the points. Then the rider came back, and then I got an opportunity to go to, I can't remember which track it was, I think. There was a big race of aces. I can't remember maybe it was at Snetterton.
Snetterton's Race of Aces, isn't it?
Is it Race of Aces? But there was they could let 500 Grand Prix bikes in with the rest of maybe it was Scarborough. Maybe it was Snetterton. Oh, honestly, I can't remember. Anyway, there was a big race. And so I got on that Sabre 500. Remember?
Yeah.
And
I was talking to Ron Haslam a couple of weeks ago. He rode that at Le Mans.
Okay, well, I should have known when they were taking the bike out of the van. I should have known to walk away, but I didn't. I was desperate to go ride it. And they put tire warmers on and hadn't even done the pressures, and it was just disorganized. The mechanic didn't seem to really know what he was doing. Anyway, we got on it, and then I had a huge moment at the end of the back straight, and by the time I got back to the pits, the nut had come off the rear wheel, and luckily there was a huge R-clip, and it had got wedged in the R-clip, and the rear wheel was just going like that. I should have parked it then, but I didn't. Anyway, it ended up throwing me. It seized and it threw me off at the bomb hole, and I badly broke my wrist. And that was me done then for the rest of the year. So 98 was a bad year. And then nobody wanted me, you know. It's hard to knock on the door when you've got, you know, you've had bad results and you're injured or whatever. So 99 was a tough year because I really just pleaded with my mum and dad, and we bought a bike, and somebody helped us out with a truck, and then we were back at British Championship again.
Did you ride was it the Old Spice Ducati? I remember your old.
No,
Which one was
it was GSE.
It was GSE.
Yeah, one of their first years when it was just plain yellow. My teammate was Troy Bayliss.
That's right. Before
which
Neil
was also
came
really
back.
tough because he was really fast, which also made me look worse.
And he was champion in 99 on it.
Yeah. I mean, he was a
Following
rapid
you.
guy. He was a rapid guy in the, you know.
Pick a good teammate.
Yeah, and our riding styles were the polar opposite.
Yeah.
He'd just park it and blast out. And I was coming from 250s, just an opposite riding style. So I couldn't really use his kind of settings anyway. It wouldn't have made any difference. I didn't know what I was doing, to be quite frank. You know, I just wasn't fast enough at that point.
I mean, I've worked with young riders before that have gone from Moto 3 to 600s. And the difference between those is the biggest that they'll ever make in terms of double the weight, double the power kind of thing.
Yeah.
But a completely different riding style, different lines.
Yeah.
And for all the years that you've done, and especially having a bike with a hinge in the middle as well, compared to the stiff frame prototypes.
Yeah.
Why was it just the team setups at the time that didn't give you the track time and they didn't have the patience?
Honestly, I got 5 races with GSE.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I was turning a corner, to be fair. But, you know, a bit more time, but, you know, I didn't get it. So, it's, you know, we'll never know. But I still believe probably the Ducati was the best suited for my riding style when I look back, because at least it actually was more of a prototype.
Historically, you would say that if you could have spent,
because I rode the other bikes then, and then I was like, holy crap, that one wasn't that bad.
You get nothing to compare it to.
You know what I mean? But exactly, I only knew a 250 to compare it to, and it did have a hinging. But once I rode the Honda and the Yamaha, I had a much bigger hinge. You know,
and you end up on the Virgin Yamaha. R1.
It was the R7.
Oh, sorry, it was the R7. It was 2000
But we were racing against thousands.
On the R7 with James Hayden and later Steve Plater.
Yeah.
What was that like to step into? I mean, they were the sort of the glamour boys of the paddock, Rob Mack, the big truck, the whole setup was sponsor friendly, wasn't it? Virgin Mobile Iowa, I think, were on there as well. To step into that team, which was then really your announcement back into the British paddock again. What talk me through those times?
I don't want to talk crap about anybody, but it was tough for me because, you know, James was up to speed and making the bike look good. In fact, he was making the bike look really, really good because he were on a 750 against the thousands, and he was giving Steve Hislop a hard time. But James had been in the class a few years. He wasn't scared. He was a very determined rider, and he could really get the best out of the bike. I got on it, and it just felt like a bathtub full of water, and that was trying to race, you know. And I again didn't have enough experience to set the bike up because I didn't know what direction to go in. And to be fair, they didn't either. They gave me basically Steve Hislop's settings from the year before, and that was it. And they didn't have any telemetry on it. And I'd come from 250s where we were dealing with telemetry at that point.
Yeah.
And then the Virgin Yamaha didn't have anything on it. Now it's okay if you're in the window. If you're in the window and everything's working okay, you can get away with probably no telemetry and a few clicks here and a few clicks there. And the team had experience, but the times are changing. And so, you know, they did have ability to put some telemetry on, but it didn't even go down in milliseconds. It went down in like
big steps.
It was pretty crazy, man. So I couldn't get the bike set up, and they didn't. You know, James was winning or up there and making the bike look good. I was struggling. I was really struggling.
James is doing it. Why aren't you?
Exactly. And I honestly just didn't feel comfortable on the bike, you know. And so it was a long, long, long season. It was a long, long season.
With the wrist injury still continuing as well?
My wrist has never been the same. I've just had wrist surgery actually now. My wrist has never been the same since that Snetterton crash. It was badly broken. I snapped it pretty badly. But I wasn't dealing with any injuries then. It was more of a head thing. It was just a bike setup. I honestly, if I'd have had a good guy working with me and we could have tried things through the year, we'd have got there. But I was put on the bike and it never changed all year.
Which is difficult when you go to the circuits that we still do today.
Yeah.
The difference in Snetterton to Alton Park to Cadwell to Donington to the more flow-in times. And I was hopeful for you at the time that was going to be
honestly
the step into
I thought
British
Rob
Superbike.
Mack's team was just going to give me a big hug
yeah,
and show me the way. And it wasn't that way at all. It was probably the polar opposite.
There was a point in your career where, and this is, I've heard this many a time and I'm fully aware of it, that there, with certain team managers, there is a time to kick and there's a time to nurture. And often enough, those times were completely misconstrued.
Yeah, yeah.
Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think...
Without picking a team manager out particularly, generally...
I think it's honestly really difficult if you've got two riders of two different wants and needs. You see it in Grand Prix now. You see Pedro Acosta in his team and you see his teammate Fernandez just struggling and saying one's loving the bike and one's hating the bike. It's a frigging same bike. But riders have a feeling. They have a feeling and it's really hard to throw caution to the wind on a big motorcycle, on a powerful motorcycle, any motorcycle actually, if you're not confident with it. If you have confidence with it, you can make a motorcycle do amazing things. I've been there, so I know you can.
I haven't.
If you haven't got that feeling with a motorcycle, you can't.
No.
And for me, to be honest with you, I couldn't get the right feeling from the Superbike stuff. And so most of the time it was taking me around the track. You know, a 250, I put that 250. Yeah. Everywhere, every millimetre on the racetrack was down to me. And now, you know, I'm offline by a ways. And, you know, it wasn't because I didn't want to be there and I couldn't get there. It's just that, you know, whatever I was doing was not working. And it's difficult to change your riding style. It would have been much easier to change the motorcycle or meet somewhere in the middle.
A little halfway house somewhere.
Yeah.
Nice. One thing I enjoy talking to riders about, it's not something I will ever understand because I never will ride at that level. But I've spoken to Ron Haslam, I've talked to Boz, I've talked to Freddie Spencer and talking to guys who understand motorcycle racing as much as you do. Feel is the single most important factor for any motorcycle racer.
Yeah. And it's almost immediate. I knew immediately when almost at the first test with the Virgin Yamaha, I was in the shit. And that was in February. I was like, God, if we don't get this feeling, what I've got now, I can do hardly anything with. And it never changed. They didn't have much patience for me wanting to change the bike, you know.
This is what we've got, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, and James was doing it, so why can't you, you know? But we had
different.
We had two totally different styles. I had quite a lot of finesse at that point. I come from 250 Grand Prix, and you know you have to have a lot of finesse, and then come into a production bike, Superbike. Especially back, I think they're a lot better now. I ride a modern Superbike, and they haven't got a hinge in the middle like they used to. They're very precise. So, unfortunately, I wasn't around for the Aprilia days. You know, I would have loved to race one of those Aprilia Superbikes because you know that for me, when I got on it, felt like a big 250, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
It kind of was, wasn't it?
It was.
That RSV.
I'm friends with Max,
yeah.
And when I said to Max, he goes, "Remind you of the 250," and I was like, "Yeah, dude." And he laughed because he was the man behind it.
Yeah, because then Leon Camier got on it and couldn't get anywhere near what Max was doing because he's 6'3".
Yeah, and you know, you don't come from that background either.
No,
Max made that motorcycle like into a big 250, and when I rode that, I was like, oh. But, you know, just 10, 20 years too late.
We'll come on to that shortly with the MotoGeo and life after racing.
Yeah.
After that was, you kind of dabbled in Supersport a little bit with your own team and back to basics.
To be honest with you, at that point, when I joined Rob Mack's team, which I really thought was going to give me the biggest hug and teach me everything, and I didn't get that. I was like, bollocks to it. I'm going to do it myself. And it was a tough few years to kind of buy the truck and get things set up and all of that. Almost like racing at that point was so secondary because of everything else that I was trying to do. But I was pretty determined, and my mum and dad honestly really helped out. My dad was there every step of the way, you know. And my mum behind the scenes that you didn't see, who was at home and then was helping us with the hospitality on weekends and doing everything. And we slowly got there. I mean, we took the team really from nothing to finishing. I think I finished 4th in the British Championship in 2007, but we were the first privateer team. There was, I think, there was a factory Suzuki team really, or certainly on a better budget.
Yeah.
And then Padgett's. And then I can't remember who else, but anyway, there was
a factory Honda team back then as well.
Yeah,
I think there was an HM plant Honda.
Exactly. I think
Carl Harris, maybe.
Yeah, it might have been Ian Hutchinson.
It could have been Hutchie. Yeah, good point. Because Plater won it later, didn't it? Was it 09 or something? I can't remember.
Yeah,
the dates get away from me.
Exactly.
We're not as young as we were.
No. And anyway, but we'd pretty much taken the team as far as we could without getting a better bike or getting some factory support, you know. And that's pretty much when we were borrowing money from the bank, buying equipment, and then had to sell all the equipment at the end of the year just to pay the bank back. And then the bank would get their money and be happy for a couple of months. And then we'd ask for a bunch more and get another loan and go again. And there's only so many years you can do that.
That's what takes away the enjoyment of the racing.
Man. Yeah. We were all stressed to go racing and trying to build your team at the time. I mean, I was lucky. I was in the racing game and we were getting more and more competitive. Excuse me. But again, once you've won, finishing 4th is pretty much the worst place you can finish.
No replacement for standing on the podium.
You know, 2nd sucks, 3rd you're happy because you got on the box, and 4th, friggin' heck.
So near but so far.
Yeah, you know, you don't even get on the podium, you know what I mean?
You don't get anything.
You get fuck off.
See you next week. Better luck next time.
So, yeah, exactly. So 4th was about as good as we got with my own team. But, you know, again, fond memories of working really closely with my mum and dad, especially my dad, of, you know, learning the game and trying to get up there. But, you know, once you win, you're kind of fucked because nothing else comes close. And that feeling,
talking to a lot of riders,
feeling of winning is like no other. It takes you so high, and then to win a championship, and well, that's all you want back in your life. You know what I mean?
You're constantly chasing it then.
Yeah. Oh, that's all. That's the only reason I continue to ride all those other years, because I wanted to feel that feeling again. You know.
Tell me about the TT.
In a nutshell, it's the most special motorcycle race on the planet. And I didn't realize that probably until it was too late, but it's a magnificent place. It's a wonderful island for a start, and the most incredible racetrack, which we call it a racetrack because it's so difficult to learn. And unlike a racetrack, it has bumps and jumps all over the place, and potholes and manhole covers and white lines to cross and curbs and fans like it's a rally track. One way of describing it really is, imagine your favourite piece of road. We've all got our favourite piece of road, right, that we drive or ride.
Yep.
Imagine the police closing the road and saying to you, okay, ride your most favourite piece of road, and then we're going to put thousands of fans to clap you as you go past. I mean, just that is an addiction. It's a magical place. I think all the riders that do it are heroes, and the fans are the best in the world.
Your dad rode it, so that gave you the that gave you the impetus, I guess.
Yeah, my dad took me on the back of his motorcycle when I was 7, 8, 9, then started riding it when I was like, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And then I went back and raced it in 2008. And then I went back in 2010 and did a parade lap. Then went back in 2011 and as a photographer. It didn't matter what side of the fence I was on, it'll blow you away. And this year I went back with my video camera, and I still can't believe what I'm watching. I still can't believe what the riders are doing. I still can't believe where the fans are. I still can't believe that it's legal. So it's so wonderful for all of those magical reasons, which is like no other race ever.
2008, you're doing your first TT. Tell me about the build up to it, about the learning and the feelings that you had. I'm going to take you right back into being that, because we've been over there. You were over there last week. We were there the week before.
Okay, this is how it happened. I was getting drunk in the end of season party at the NEC, and I bumped into John McGuinness. And John McGuinness said, I said to John, hey John, what about the TT? And I mentioned it a few times to him, but he hadn't really come forward, because he said, oh, I thought you hated the TT or whatever. I only hated the TT when I was a 250 Grand Prix rider, because all my sponsorship that I wanted to take with me was going elsewhere. It wasn't the race itself. It was more the fact the sponsors weren't on my side, you know. And John McGuinness says to me, look, if you're interested in the TT, go and speak to that man. And that was Milky Quayle. So I went over to Milky. Milky was half drunk. And I said, Milky, I'm interested in doing the TT. And straight away, and he got his phone out and showed me his horrendous crash. And that was the first introduction to the TT, basically. And by the end of the night, he said to me, look, if you're interested in coming, fly over, we'll take you round, and, you know, we'll go from there. So I did. I flew over. The first night, Milky picks me up from the airport, and we did 2 laps around the island in pitch black, because the island's quiet. So I think he picked me up at like 10 p.m. or something, and we went around the island for a couple of laps. And the whole time he's commentating, right? And I remember the start and finish line. I can remember, like, after this start and finish line, and then everything just going into one big blur, right? Until I think I got to maybe Parliament Square, you know, and kind of like that looked different. And then we went up over the mountain and bits and pieces. And then we did another lap. And then he's like, okay, do you recognize where you are? And I didn't have a clue, man. I didn't have a clue. I remember then, like, oh, Parliament Square, or the start and finish line, or like out of 300 and odd corners, I can remember like coming in back, and I could recognize 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I went to bed that night. They'd given me a book of the TT, and I went to bed that night, head spinning, just thinking, how the heck can anybody learn this place? And then I went home and thought about it, and thought about it, and thought about it, and thought about it. And then my challenge was like to learn the track. And then Milky told me that there was a fairly slow, which it wasn't slow because it was Brian Reed on his TZ 250, but he did 100 mile an hour lap, and it was it was a really beautiful camera angle.
Yeah,
you could see the revs, see the track, and the track's changed a little bit, but I watched that every night for 6 months, because it wasn't a computer game back then.
No. And YouTube was massively in its infancy.
Yeah. So I just watched this video of Brian Reed on a VHS like every night before I went to bed. And then I turned up at the Isle of Man like a week early and borrowed a bike and just got up at like 5 o'clock every morning and did a couple of laps. And just tried to somehow figure out what's next. Because that's the Isle of Man for you, is basically just trying to don't get caught out on any corner, you know.
Joining the dots.
Yeah, and always being ahead of the game, not arriving at a corner going, whoa, you know, you've always just got to go. You've always, you know, so that was the toughest thing, was really just learning the track. And then I still can't believe I did it, but I'd only ever ridden short circuits, and they were the smoothest place on the planet, right? In terms of like beautiful tarmac. I'd never even done a road race. I should have at least gone to Scarborough. I'd done something, right? But I let the clutch out to follow the travelling marshal in the Isle of Man TT, and I couldn't frigging believe it. And I was just like, oh my God. And I couldn't, that was even, you know, it had only just set off. And then the travelling marshal just fucked off straight away, man. And I was just like, slow down, wait for me. And I couldn't believe how different the track changed from using both sides of the road.
Yeah, with the crown in the middle, the cameras, everything
Well,
that
just
goes
the
with it.
sheer speed of what you could go through some corners, whereas I've been learning the track early
Oh,
in
of
the
course.
morning.
Yeah, yeah, on the proper side of the road. Yeah.
I couldn't believe how much faster the track was.
Zero Fit, the king of base layers, are worn by Bennett's British Superbike riders Glenn Irwin, Andrew Irwin and Lee Jackson. And as proud sponsors of this show, Zero Fit are offering you a free thermal beanie with every base layer purchased. It's really simple. All you have to do is scan this QR code and enter OT24 when you check out. Thank you, and back to the show.
It scared me. It literally scared me that it was that fast initially. I'd never been that fast for that long. Like, and just as a stat, the other day, James Hillier, I just happened to be talking to James, and this is on his Superbike. How many seconds do you think a Superbike is wide open around the Isle of Man? How many seconds per lap on a Superbike?
$3 minutes worth?
320 seconds, right?
Okay.
It's just a lot of time.
That's an awful lot of time.
Right. And I was running a 600, so you can imagine it's probably double
It's
that.
double and a bit more, yeah.
I couldn't believe how much I was flat. I was just like, how fast are you going around? And the corners at the Isle of Man, they're fast, man. Super fast. So I'd never been on a road track. I couldn't believe how bumpy it was. Couldn't believe how fast I was going for so long. And then it was just a wonderful experience, you know, and petrifying all rolled into one. Because, you know, I've been around the game long enough, and there was a lot of corners that I, unfortunately, or whatever, but I put down to people dying and friends of mine that have died around the track. And it wasn't, so it wasn't an easy place to really commit yourself fully until you really knew where you were going. And I never really knew where I was going until really my last lap of my last race that I did there. Because leading up to that, we'd had some weather problems and I missed a night of practice and I just wasn't up to speed. I just didn't trust myself around the track. So I always had room to spare, really. But what the Isle of Man really did for me was bring back my enthusiasm for motorcycling, which I was really waning in the British Championship. You know, there's a lot of politics in racing, which I never knew existed when I was a young kid. I was just young and determined and trying to get as far as I got. Once I've been in the game for long enough, actually, there's a lot of politics. And, you know, I'm not interested in politics, really. So, you know, like, that took the fun out of motorcycling for me. And when I went to the TT, it just gave me all of those amazing feelings back of why I loved motorcycling.
It's motorcycle racing in its most raw fashion, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Here's a bike, here's a course, go as fast as you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
But also, it's just a wonderful experience that the paddock, where the fans are coming through the paddock again, it's like going Grand Prix racing in the 70s and 80s. You know, they've kept that, you know, there's a few VIP areas here and there, but generally a fan of the Isle of Man can get off the boat and come and see the team and get autographs, get right next to the action, see it all, can really be a part of it. And I feel that that's a part of the TT too. It's not just the track and the riders and setting like records or winning races. It's also the fans that are there to cheer you on.
It's not a race, it's an experience.
Yeah, it's a race for a few, you know.
But generally, the TT is an experience for people. Yes, you're racing against the clock, and there's guys there going professionally, and you see what Davey Todd's done this year, what MD's done. Hickey, not quite there this season, but for this year, and James having a good year, it's what their years are built around.
It's incredible, man. When I'll just tell you a quick story of just how crazy the Isle of Man is, really. My first race there, sorry. About a minute before you get to the start, so everyone's going 10 seconds, right? When they first go, I was number 33. It seemed so long away. It seemed so far away, and we're just moving slowly down. But then the tyre warmers have to come off, and at about 60 seconds, you go into a different holding area. Then it gets real, man. So I said, see you later to my dad. And I got into this holding area and we started like 40 seconds, 30 seconds, 20 seconds. And at that point, I'm like, my heart's beating. The rider in front of me gets off his motorbike and just starts walking towards me. And I'm just thinking, what are you doing, dude? What are you doing, dude? And then he just comes up to me and this is no lie. He goes, I'll see you in the bar afterwards. And then he just got on his motorbike and let the clutch out. And
Brilliant.
And that's exactly what we did. We finished the race and went for a pint together, you know, and it was epic, man. And that would never happen anywhere else on the planet. Start line of a BSB or a MotoGP, everyone's, you know, like sunglasses on, listen, you know, Isleman TT, I'll see you for a pint afterwards. And it was, I don't know, there was a amazing like that, you know.
I forget who was telling me, and the viewers and the listeners will remind me of this. Somebody was telling me about that up on the start line, that they'd gone into the holding area and all of a sudden, and it might have been Simo, actually, it might have been Simo earlier this year. And it basically said he'd gone into the point and he'd forgotten to say, I'll catch you for a pint after. So he's waving his mechanic back. His mechanic's arse is going like this because he thinks something's falling off. He went, I'll catch you for a pint after. The mechanic's like, okay. What?
Yeah.
But I sound like a stuck record. I apologize to, if I don't apologize, it's my show, whatever. I sound like a stuck record for this because the tap man at the TT is the most fascinating man on that grid because he has all the power.
Yeah,
he sets you off or he doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's that fatherly hold on the shoulder. Because you're in no man's land. What's going through your mind at that point? Can you remember?
What am I doing? What are you fucking doing?
Because all you can see is St. Ninians at the top of break.
What are you thinking? What are you doing here? And then the guy got off his motorbike and said, I'll see you in the bar afterwards. And I totally forgot about everything. I'll tell you what, another funny bit though. He took off and then they pulled me up and he's holding my shoulder. And I don't know why, but I looked down the line of people because there's just hundreds of people. And I just glanced over and guess who I looked eyes to eye with? My mum.
No.
Yeah.
Which is lovely and difficult at the same time.
The look on her face, man, I'll still never forget it. I never told my mum that. But I clocked eyes with my mum too. So it was like a bizarre minute. I said see you to my dad. I'll see you in the bar afterwards. And then I clocked eyes with my mum and then I went down Bray Hill. Oh dear!
You never did it easy, mate.
No, dude, it was a pretty interesting experience, but it was epic. It was just so epic because so much was on the line, and it felt, you know, I never felt like I shouldn't be there, and I never felt like I was out of control anyway. In fact, I had one little moment, and but after that, you know, I never pushed it because I had a moment when I was pushing, trying to be faster. And the Isle of Man is not a place to push before you can. It comes to you. You can't push the Isle of Man to get a lap time. The lap time just comes to you. You know what I mean? It's a wonderful track and a wonderful experience.
Where did you have the moment, Jamie?
Where that guy went through the pub. Remember No Limits? Remember the old film No Limits?
Ballacrane.
Yeah, Ballacrane. Yeah. So my dad had put new brake
George
pads.
Formby.
Yeah, George Formby. Right. I nearly did a George Formby, man. Yeah, I came into Ballacrane. Well, what had happened was, you know, it was my last night of practice, and I got away, went down Bray Hill, and I went past DJ's corner and then up over the Crosby.
Yeah.
And then this experienced rider who wasn't on the fastest bike and not in the best shape, because I can remember him being a little chunkier than me, you know, just come sailing by, and he pointed to his seat and just told me to tuck in. And he was a really experienced guy, but he gapped me straight away. You know, he was going faster than me, and I wasn't really prepared to throw myself into a difficult situation. Anyway, so he gapped me straight away. Not a lot, but, you know, maybe a second or two.
Yeah.
And then I was getting pulled along with him a bit. And then we came into Ballycrane, and I just thought, I can nip up a bit of time on the brakes. So I tried to, but I forgot that my dad had told me to bed in the brake pads for the race.
Oh.
And so I did. I did do it at Quarterbridge, and I did do it into Braddon Bridge. But then I just got on it, right? And so by the time we got to Ballycrane, that was the furthest thing from my mind. But anyway, when I pulled the brake in, it didn't stop me like I expected it to stop me. So I ran in there a little fast, and I kind of just froze, to be truthful. I saw that bale of hay coming, and I just was like, and I clipped the bale of hay and took a big gouge out of it with my foot peg. And then I looked down to see if my foot peg was still there, and it was just straw. Part of a straw bale. And then just as that happened, John McGuinness flew past on this side, pointing to his head, which is just telling me to think about it, And then I finished the lap. And by the time I got back to the fucking pits, man, John McGuinness had told my dad, and my dad was proper mad. So he gave me a kick up the arse, a proper kick up the arse, a physical kick up the arse, And what the fuck are you doing, Because I was in the Paget's team at the time, and John was in the Paget team. So word got around pretty quickly that I'd had a moment. So not only had I had a moment, but it had been witnessed by my teammate. And you're like, God damn it. But it was all right. It was. Luckily, I got away with it, so I'm thankful for that. But it was a rude awakening of how brutal the TT can be, and not to push it. It's got to come to you.
Yeah.
And so I did my first race there, and just learn. The same guy, see you in the bar afterwards. He was in front of me every time. It took me 2.5 laps to catch that guy. And then I learned a lot from him.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from his experience. So.
What were the races like for you? Were they 4 laps, pit stop?
Yep.
Standard as it is today, nothing really changed too much in that time.
Totally the same,
But once the races got underway, what was your mindset and your feeling?
Oh, I loved it. Best thing I've ever done on a motorcycle. And I've been lucky to ride in a lot of places on a lot of motorcycles. I couldn't even care where I finished. I didn't care. I didn't give a shit. It was the best thing I'd ever done on a motorcycle. Yeah.
I find it fascinating, the whole TT thing. I have the ultimate respect. I love BSB, I love World Super, I love all motorcycle racing.
Yeah.
It's why I do this.
Yeah.
But for the TT, having worked it with OMG in 22 for the full 2 weeks, and understanding it was a difficult year. First one back after COVID. Far too many unfortunate incidents and tragedies. And you live in the whole thing for 15 days.
Yeah, yeah.
And, we're as punters, we go for a few days, we leave again. But when you're in it, the intensity for those 2 weeks is like nothing you'll ever experience anywhere else.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me just tell you this, right? So I always took my racing seriously. I trained hard, and I was really focused, and probably miserable at the racetrack because I was just a focused rider. When I got to the TT, really focused too. And when I hit that straw bale, John McGuinness came to find me afterwards and said, "You need to come to the pub tonight." And I was just like, "What?" And he was like, "You need to relax, man. You need to relax. It's 2 weeks. The TT's 2 weeks. Come and relax." No, dude. I don't need to. I don't need to go to the pub. And he was like, "Well, we're going to be here tonight, so pop down for a pint." And I was just thinking, well, this is crazy. You know what I mean? We're motorcycle racing, And then my dad actually encouraged me. He said, "Yeah, just go down. Just take your mind off it." So I can't remember where it was, to be honest with you. Down on the prom somewhere.
Down the Queens or somewhere like that.
I opened this pub door, and John McGuinness, and there was Steve Plater and a load of riders, and they were all having a pint, and they were all having the time of their life. They were all half drunk, and they were having a great time together. And I was just like, where am I? The Isle of Man is amazing, right? So I just joined them, and just, you needed to forget about the Isle of Man because it's so intense. It's just, you know, sometimes, you know, I hate to say it, but like kind of on the Isle of Man, live like it, live every day like it's your last, because it might be. And all riders know that, and we all go into it knowing that. And then I think there was this amazing camaraderie with the riders because of that, right? So even that was a new experience. At British Championship, we're all doing British Championship, but we're not going down for a pint together.
No. You're lucky if you even speak to each other.
Exactly. You end up hating each other because they've got your sponsors, or maybe a ride, or I don't know, whatever. There, it's a family. And again, just an amazing experience because of that. For me, it's been the hardest thing not to do again.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
It's something I think about every year, think about more than once a year, of course. You know, it's just, it's like no other place I can describe it. And so it's always a real attraction, you know.
How was it last week while you're over there, being back on the island again after a few years?
Well, you know, honestly, I went, I'll be really truthful with you. I went because I was losing my love for motorcycling again, right? And it's only because I'd been involved in a couple of bad accidents on the street in Los Angeles, actually. And one of them nearly killed a friend of mine. And then I got hurt in both of them. So to be quite honest with you, I was struggling a bit from that side. And then I also was involved in somebody else's incident where he got very badly injured. And just those quick series of events within about a year of each other, pretty much, I definitely lost a little bit of spark for motorcycling. I've broken my wrist that I've been now suffering with for like over 5 years. And so I wasn't even enjoying riding a motorcycle because it was painful, right? And I've just had surgery and I'm trying to rectify that. But I knew I had to go back to the Isle of Man. I just had to go back to the Isle of Man because if I didn't get my love back for motorcycling at the Isle of Man, I had lost it completely.
It's the market.
You know,
it's where you found it again. So why? It's a pilgrimage, isn't it?
It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. I went across as a foot passenger with a tent. And by the time I got off the boat, I had a house and a motorbike. So like already I was just like, and you know, it was like being back home. And almost like, how the heck did I not do this again? You know, it was just, the TT does that to you though, you know. Wonderful, wonderful, just wonderful getting on the ferry and seeing all the bikers there. Wonderful just seeing them all strapped down on the boat. Wonderful getting on the boat and that anticipation of seeing the island and then seeing that little island come to life. You're like, oh, the docks, you get off the ferry and the whole island looked at exactly the same. I haven't been for 10 years, 9 years, 10 years. And it looked just exactly the same. Same as when I was 7 years old. It's a time warp. So,
like I said to you earlier, Bugs Fizz are still number one.
Yeah, it's true. It's an incredible place and somewhere that you know, I needed to go back to find my love for everything motorcycling again, and it did it in an instant.
I was going to say, how's the flame now?
Yeah, burning.
Which segues us nicely into MotoGeo. The YouTube channel and the lifestyle motorcycle channel that you set up as kind of one of the first or one of the early moto vloggers.
Yeah.
You did it before a lot of people really cottoned onto it.
Yeah.
And moving over to the States and taking that punt to go and live in South California.
Yeah.
Away from the beautiful landscape that we are here at Mum and Dad's.
Yeah. Yeah.
Complete yin and yang. Tell me about that part of your life, because that's like Jamie Robinson part 2.
Yeah, I was having this conversation actually yesterday with my mum because we were talking about the TT, and then, you know, it just feels like my racing now feels like a different life. I know it might sound really crazy, but there was a chunk of my life, and then I went over to America. I took a different path. I started traveling on a motorcycle and, you know, basically documenting my travels. And there was an addiction to that too, because I come off the Isle of Man and I'd watched Ewan McGregor and Charlie Boorman, right?
Yeah.
And I just thought to myself, I want a piece of that. but I don't want to do it the way they did it. Not that they did it in any which way wrong, but I was just like, who could take 6 months off work? Who's got $1 million budget? Who's got all of this? I just wanted to do it on a whim, basically. So I flew to New York, bought a motorcycle for $200 and rode it all the way across America. And that was my first kind of vlog, you know. And that I never looked back after that, really. That actually got me a job in California, being an editor at a magazine. So I took a bit of time off the video camera and became editor of a magazine for a couple of years, which helped me get my green card, which helped me get established in California. And then the magazine world was going down. We were losing subscribers, less sales. Magazine was getting thinner.
Yeah.
Paper was getting less quality. And magazines were just kind of going away. And, you know, it was crazy. I was at the office when actually Vimeo came to see us in the office,
Okay.
you know, trying to get us on Vimeo. I mean, who does that now, right? So these were the really early days of video. And I just segued straight into that because I wasn't very good at writing. So I sat on my computer, taking photographs and then writing about it. I felt like there was something missing.
Mm-hmm.
And a video camera filled in that void. I could tell much better story with a video camera than I ever could with my words and a few photographs, you know. So I just threw myself kind of into that, really, and started picking up a video camera and winging it. And slowly but surely got better. And, you know, here we are.
Isn't it amazing how far you get by just winging it?
Oh, yes. I did it all the way through my racing career.
I haven't got where I am today by not winging it.
Yeah. I've got two good teachers, my mum and dad, you know, like they're always very, say, determined.
Yeah.
Do it, get on and do it, you know, and well, just give it a go. And you learn a lot from that, don't you?
100%. People today, I think, are scared to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And you only learn by failing.
Really.
It's not the done thing to fail. With the world we have today, with Instagram and everything's got to be a success. You've got to do this, but
everything's got to be perfect.
There's a whole host of shit that goes on behind the scenes, and to get where they're even doing this, you know, we have good days, we have bad days.
Yeah,
this is one of the good days, mate, as you know. Tell me some of the great adventures you've been on with MotoGeo, because it's been a fascinating growth on the channel.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. You know, I just try and work with I don't try and work with just one brand. I try and work with them all. I try not to go on one particular adventure. I try and go on them all. So I'll ride anything with two wheels and an engine, basically, and I'll ride it anywhere. But, you know, like, I think one of my fondest adventures is definitely my first one in New York, trying to find a motorcycle and going around New York and just trying to put all of those kind of little pieces together to just get a motorcycle, you know. And then I just bought myself a tent and just winged it. I can remember my first night I'd left New York and I was in the Catskill Mountains and I'm setting my tent up. And this guy comes alongside me and just, you know, in his 4x4 and he goes, "Hey, buddy, you know that there's bears around here?" And I was like, "Bears? Like, what are you talking about? I'm from Home Firth, you know what I mean?" And he was just like, "Yeah, dude, you're in bear country here. I'd keep going if I were you." And I was like, "Are you serious?" And then as he drove off, I thought, yeah, okay. So I put my tent down and then just rode for ages until I came to a village and then just put my tent up at the side of the road somewhere. And, you know, what I found out from that adventure is just how amazing it is to travel on a motorcycle, especially solo. When you come, you're already vulnerable enough. And if you're solo on a motorcycle, you're even more vulnerable, right? And if you just pull up, it doesn't matter, people will help you. And it was just amazing to just ride through the country and just see people's reactions about what I was doing, just riding across America and photographing my travels. And I came across all kinds of problems. And it was, I don't know, just people helping you out along the way. And so I got addicted to that, really. And that pushed me away from racing. But the TT was always on my mind, you know. So that's always been something that's kind of, it's hard to walk away from, but everything else wasn't. I don't want to do any more short circuit racing. after doing the TT, man, I felt to myself like, what was I doing for the last 18 years?
Could have been a contender.
But, you know, like, I was also a crasher, you know, through my 250 days pushing as hard as I did. And the Isle of Man's not a place to kind of crash. So I think I went at the right time, you know.
I think there's a certain maturity that you need to have, unless you are bred there, like your Jim Hines and guys like that, and you go at an early age and that's all you do. You do Scarborough, you do the Northwest, you do like the Dunlop boys, you do the Irish races. You don't get into that short circuit mentality.
Yeah. It's a different way.
You have to go, for me personally, late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
In the same way that that Glenn did.
Yeah.
In 22, he was the right age to do it.
Yeah.
He had the family, so he had the safety caption pop up whenever he needed it.
Yeah.
And he did it, and he was brilliant. And he decided, you know what? I'm not sure I can to where Hickey, Davey, Dean, and the rest of the boys are.
Yeah.
One question I'm going to ask that's just kind of popped into my head. This is quite a deep question.
Go on.
What was the difference in the Jamie Robinson that set off in New York to the Jamie Robinson that arrived in LA after that trip?
Oof. Yeah, that I didn't have to fear anything, you know. I think another love for motorcycling, another level of freedom. I think I just found another level of freedom on two wheels. And I'd only been racing, even though the Isle of Man had brought everything back to a positive, and the Isle of Man could have gone either way, right? But it just happened that I loved it, and so pleased that I did. But I'd never travelled on a motorcycle. I'd never slept in a tent like for 2 weeks. I'd never, you know, pleaded with somebody to help fix my motorcycle. I'd never bought a motorcycle for $200 before. You know, there were so many things that I did differently, and I just wanted to make it that way. But coming out the other end of it was just like, oh my God, this is addictive. This is really addictive. Traveling on a motorcycle and seeing things was really addictive, you know.
Best place you visited?
On a motorcycle?
Yeah, for the show.
Isle of Man.
I did wonder.
Yeah.
I did wonder.
Yeah. I've rode to the Isle of Man twice. Once I got a motorcycle. I went down to Spain for the motocross Grand Prix. Then I went across to the Erzberg rodeo. Then I went to Mugello, and then I rode to the TT. And the TT was just, it was like the cherry on top, you know. And then I've done it a few times, but there's no feeling like it of riding onto that ferry. I don't know what it is, man. It's just, I don't know, just the amount of motorcycles. It's just nothing like it.
Everybody's there for the same thing.
Yeah.
And everybody has that same feeling. That's why they're going.
Yeah. I didn't see any aggressive people there at all. In fact, I've never seen any aggressive people there. Everyone's just there for the love of motorcycle racing.
Didn't you go to Mugello one year and have an R6 nicked?
No, I had my wallet nicked.
Oh, you had a wallet nicked?
I turned up on the R6.
You turned up on the R6, but I had the wallet nicked at the time.
Yeah. So I didn't know that, well, those things do happen. But up until that point, I'd actually been lucky sleeping in a tent. But Mugello was so noisy. I think I put my earplugs in, which was a bad thing to do at Mugello because I got a tent broken into during the night and stuff taken. But I went back the next year and exactly the same thing happened again. So that was a lesson learned.
Good grief!
Yeah, I was ready for them the second year, though. But they still tried. Yeah.
Baseball bats and all. Yeah. Torque wrenches, whatever you've got.
I fell asleep, but I made sure that I tied my tent from the inside and secured it.
Cable ties and everything.
Yeah, there was a bunch of us. There was 3 of us that did it, but they tried to mess with us all. So
they're not shy, are they?
No. But you learn most of the time traveling on a motorcycle. You've got no problem.
Yeah. We done Pikes Peak.
Yeah. Pikes was fun.
Tell me about that.
So I got an opportunity to do Pikes Peak with Ducati, and they wanted to promote a motorcycle, their Pikes Peak version, which has got better exhaust, suspension, and some carbon fiber screen that you can't even see through. And but also it's based off the Multistrada.
Yes.
And so that what they wanted to do with the video, because I make videos and travel videos, is use the multistrada to ride to Pikes Peak, change the parts to make it into a Pikes Peak version, and then race it up the hill. Which was awesome. But again, another tough track to learn. Really extremes. Pikes Peak for me was more dangerous than the Isle of Man. And yeah, a little bit more extreme. And it was mainly because the TT is designed around a motorcycle race. It's just motorcycles, whereas Pikes Peak, it's a car event that invite the motorcycles. And they just wanted us to clean the track for them so that they could go even faster in the afternoon.
Brilliant.
So they let the motorcycles clean the track in the morning. And the marshals can't see each other. It's not like the TT where every marshal can see each other.
Oh, they've got line of sight.
So it just happened to be that I took with me on my team a photographer and a videographer. And there are 3 practices and then the race. And the 3 practices, they separate this, they cut the track off in thirds. And while you practice, let's say, the bottom section, the cars will be practicing the middle section.
Okay.
And then when you do the middle section, the cars will be at the top. And then when you do the top, the cars might be at the bottom, right? So they just switch it up. But you've still got to come to a stop in that section. And then the next section starts, let's say, a couple of corners. So there was always a couple of corners I'd never gone around.
Of course, yeah.
Right? Because they stop in the motorcycles and then start in the cars. So there was always at least one corner. And then on race day, you join it all together. So that was mad because I never got a chance to join it all together until race day. And then my photographer and videographer were up on the mountain on the last practice day. So they were right at the top of the mountain with a magnificent chance to get a photo, which was snow on the inside, track, all the way down the mountain, and the view of like 14,000 feet. So an incredible place to be. I came through, I'd done a couple of runs. They got the shot they needed. My photographer was putting his equipment away, and there was a crash, and a rider crashed really close to my photographer and was killed instantly. And the organisers didn't know anything about it because there was no marshals there. So my photographer had to go to the rider, and then he'd never seen a dead body before and had to see if he was alive and if he could help him, which unfortunately he couldn't. And then he had to run up and get on the track, and there's still an open track here. Anyway, eventually they stopped some riders, and a rider stopped, and then he had to tell the rider someone's crashed, and that rider had to continue and finish the course before he could tell anyone. And all in all, that stuff shouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen if it was a motorcycle race. That's all I could do.
No, it wouldn't. No, not at all.
And so that for me, I didn't go back after that because I just thought it was badly organised. And just before the start of the race, they got all the motorcyclists together and they made us turn our phones off and no recording. And then they literally just said, stop dying on the mountain. Anybody else dies, we're going to stop motorcycling. And I was just blown away with how they were treating us, you know.
Second-class citizens.
Yeah. They didn't want us there. It was a car event, you know. But the motorcycles, they were popular with the fans, and it was a great event. Actually, I thought it was a good fun event. But it looked more professional than it was. And knowing the Isle of Man the way that I do, and that every marshal can see each other, and you know, you'd never get that in the Isle of Man, that somebody would go missing.
No, imagine something happening to somebody at the Craig, but then having to pedal on down to the grandstand to let somebody know.
There you go. Well, that's pretty much what happened. And for me, it just left a bad taste in my mouth. So actually, on race day, I could have rode faster, but I didn't.
No, it's self-preservation.
I did what I had to do. I got to the top of the hill, but you know, I kind of again, you know, but that's the raw, the other side of you know, motorsport that we don't always see, the fans don't always see. But it was really tough for me to get back on the motorcycle and race to the top of that hill. Like, for some reason, it really affected me. But it affected me because my photographer, my videographer were there, and they were in bits. And they didn't even want to go back up to Pikes Peak the next day and finish the video off, you know. And everybody was affected. And it affected me because it affected them. You know, if I'd have just been a rider, it'd have been a bad day. but it ended up being like a very bad day.
There's responsibility for them as well, and bringing them into the that arena.
Yeah.
You've got a responsibility to them and what they do. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
What's next for MotoGeo? Where are we at now? What's happening with Jamie Robinson now?
I don't know now.
For the next few years?
I don't know now because I've just got back from the TT and I'm all TT'd. To be honest with you, I started MotoGeo because I wanted to inspire people to ride motorcycles. That's why I started it. I'm a huge advocate of motorcycles, right? So I just wanted to kind of pass that on. And I felt like if I could get more people riding motorcycles and show a different side to motorcycling, which I'd just found out, which was traveling and how amazing it could be, I'd devote the next period of my life for that. So that's where I'm at really at the moment. And so really, I've just had surgery on my wrist and I just can't wait to get back on a motorcycle again. It's been too long. And, I'm trying to behave, but it's a scaphoid and it takes a long time to heal. And mine's been broken over 5 years, so it was pretty problematic. So I've just got to get my wrist back to into some good, into a good place where I can ride and not feel pain.
How similar is it to JT's wrist?
I don't know.
James Toseland had similar issues with scaphoid, and when he played the piano,
it's bad because I lost just use of my thumb, and it's hard not to ride a motorcycle without your thumb. And also how many other things that you do without using your thumb, So I'm just starting to get some use back of my thumb again, but I haven't really got any grip strength and I can't really move it so much at the moment. So I've just got to work on that, really.
Plenty of work to do.
Yeah, but it's only my left hand, and that's the one.
That's the one that matters.
This is the one that I have most fun with.
So this is the one that matters.
This one's fine. Yeah,
I think we've covered some of the little questions that I had at the bottom. That was fairly easy done. But we have some little fun questions as well that we throw in at the end of every show.
Sounds good.
Oh, this is good fun. This is good fun. Do you want odds or evens?
Oh God, odd.
Excellent. Because it's one of my favourite questions. What's your most embarrassing moment, Jamie?
Oh, good grief! I've had that many. I can't know if I can pick one. Oh, good God! You put me on the spot there, eh?
These are on the spot questions. I had this. I'll give you a bit of time to think.
No.
Go.
Easy.
Oh, okay.
I finished 8th in Mugello. Listen to this. You're going to love this. I changed a rule in MotoGP. A rule came in because of something I did.
The Jamie Robinson.
Yeah. Listen to this one. I brought in the rule that you can only celebrate if you finish in the top 3 because I finished 8th at Mugello and I did this massive burnout at the end and all the crowd are going, woo! And I'm like, yeah. And then I just thought, I don't know why, I'd set off while it's still burning out and just do like wiggle the back end a bit. Dude, I wasn't on a road bike, I was on a Grand Prix bike and it just went, and it high-sided me immediately. Yeah, that was pretty embarrassing because the crowd were all going, yeah. And then I crashed and the crowd went, really roared. And then I had to pick the bike up and the screen had broken and I got a lot of grass in the bike and stuff, and then I rode off. And then, my team were all clapping me as I came in. And then they were like, well, the bike comes in half crashed. And then the Italians kept showing it on Eurosport. So,
look at this guy.
Yeah, that was pretty embarrassing. Yeah.
That's a decent one.
Yeah.
That's reminiscent of James Hayden at Barcelona. Flipping the GP bike.
Oh wow!
In front of the Barcelona grandstand. Very reminiscent of that.
Yeah.
This is always an interesting one. 4 dinner party guests. 1 from sport. 1 from music. 1 from the movies. And a wild card.
Whew, good grief! Dead or alive?
Both.
Right.
Or either, should I say? Because you can't be both.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Wow, tough. I'm not much of a music guy, but I'd throw Bob Marley in there for sure. 1 from sport. Well, I don't like any other sport than motorcycling. And then I think I'd have to go with somebody that I'd probably never got the chance to meet. So it'd be pretty cool to have dinner with Mike Hillwood, I think.
It's a great one.
What was that? What was the next?
Movies.
Movies.
Land of LA.
Yeah, I'm not a big movie fan either. But well, Brad Pitt's into motorcycling.
Yeah.
I think it'd be pretty cool to hang out with Brad for a day, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So let's throw Brad in
We
there.
can take that.
And then a wild card.
Yeah.
Oof.
This could be like anybody from history. It could be anybody at all.
Good question. God, probably put me on the spot here, haven't you? Giacomo Agostini.
Yeah. Oh, Halewood and Aggo with the stories.
Yeah. Probably
Bob Marley chilling everybody out. That'd be amazing. Without even trying.
Oh dear. I should change at least one of them.
Good job, mate. No, that's without even. It's the beauty of how that's come to pass is thinking of different people on their own merits.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not a preconceived.
Yeah.
That's so.
I'll take that. Everyone that was not alive. I did, didn't I? I didn't mean to do that.
No, Giacomo's still alive.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. My son's named after him actually. So I'm a fan of Giacomo.
Excellent.
I mean, he was a real inspiration, you know.
When motorcycle racers were revered. I mean, we revere as punters, as followers of the sport, but your Giacomo Agostini's of this world transcended the sport and became their own person.
Yeah.
With the people that they hung around with they became part of Italian royalty.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking at the Isle of Man TT trophy, the senior trophy, and the names on that was just phenomenal, man. Just phenomenal. He's a part of that history of coming to the Isle of Man, and probably one of the few Italians that's ever won the senior.
Winning the senior, certainly. When you look at the smaller bikes, Luigi Taveri and people who rode the Honda 6, but to actually win the big bike race, it was the sort of the staple of Phil Reed and Mike Halewood and the rest of the big name, Jeff Duke, amongst many others. But yeah, for him to come over and do that as part of the World Championship,
pretty cool doing it, didn't he?
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I see those photos of him back in the day. You're like, dude was cool without even trying, man.
Effortlessly cool.
Yeah,
something I will never be. What annoys you most in life, mate?
Rude people, I'd say. Yeah,
fair.
Rude people.
The one decision you'd change if you could.
Going back to the Isle of Man. Yeah.
I think we covered that one nicely, didn't we? Here's one. What was the last thing you did for the first time?
The last thing I did for the first time? Pikes Peak. Does that work?
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah. What do they do? If you could have any superpower, what would it be? We talked about that earlier in front end feel and things like that. If you had a proper superpower, what would it be?
Probably to be good exiting corners as well as entering. Yeah.
No, that's fair.
I need a Bayliss superpower with my right hand to exit corners as well as going into them, you know.
What's the one food you could never give up?
Oh. Burger.
I would agree with that.
Or a Yorkshire pudding. In fact, I went out the other night and starter, I had a Yorkshire pudding, and for me, I had a big burger.
But Yorkshire pudding were a starter.
Yeah.
Traditionally, Yorkshire puddings were a starter.
Right.
And it's lost over time. But yeah, Yorkshire pudding was a starter ahead of your main meal.
Yeah.
But yeah, Yorkshire, that's full carb. That's like, we are carb central to that.
I was in Yorkshire, man, and then I had a burger on the menu, so I'm like...
And you had the Yorkshire fish cake for lunch?
Yeah, the Yorkshire fish cake, that's something else, that.
I couldn't, man. I'm pleased I'd eaten beforehand. What superstitions did you have?
So this is quite a funny one. I started wearing the same underwear for some reason. and my lucky pants, my lucky underpants, right? And I won the British Championship in them. In fact, I'd probably been wearing them a couple of years by the time I won the British Championship in them. And then I went into the World Championship with them. And they were pretty rank, man, and a bit holy. And my bits were sticking out of them at some point. And I got my leathers cut off me in Italy, and there were all these beautiful nurses around. And I got my lucky underpants on with my bits hanging out. So yeah, I didn't bother putting lucky underpants on after that, because I thought to myself, if I'm in hospital, I'm not so lucky, am I, really?
You're not really that lucky. I did expect to see them on the wall at some point.
You wouldn't want to see them.
A bit like Foggy's green vest that he's got up on his wall.
But probably worse, seeing as they were
from that part of the world. Yeah,
and then also my boots. I swapped my one red, one blue. And that only came about because I had a set of red ones and I had a set of blue ones. And then I ended up wearing one out and wearing the other out. And the only pair I had were odd. And then I had some good success like that. So I just continued to try and wear odd boots. But that were more just back in my 250 days, you know?
Yeah.
But as I got older, I stopped having superstitions, to be honest with you. Started having just trying to get in the zone, really, and not really having those crazy superstitions, because they can run away with you. Your head's like a fragile place sometimes if you just...
Imagine trying to get everything into one place and everything.
Yeah.
When something so trivial can upset the whole
it was
process.
Ridiculous. Exactly. So you just, as I got more experience, I became less and less superstitious.
2 questions to finish, and thank you for this. It's been
pleasure.
Absolutely tremendous. The same questions we give to every new guest. The first one is in 2 parts.
Okay.
What was your favourite corner and why?
Good grief again. Wow. Well, I'd probably have to say it's on the Isle of Man, but now I'll have to think where.
320 corners or something to choose from?
I think Gorse Lee is pretty hard to beat.
We watched from there last Wednesday, 2 weeks ago.
Isn't it something else?
Yeah.
Friday
night. It was a Friday night we were down there.
I went there and raced it, and I can remember these heads popping out of the wall.
On Harold's wall.
Flying past this wall and throwing it into a corner almost flat out. And thinking to myself, I'm going to watch there for the senior. And I wish I hadn't. Because I was just like, no way. It was so scary. It was so scary watching it from the side compared to as it was riding it. The Isle of Man actually scared me more being a spectator than it was ever as a rider.
I could believe that, because you're in control and you see an awful lot more than we do.
Yeah. But I'm probably have to go back on that, actually, because the bottom of Bray Hill, when I went through Bray Hill flat out, I think I told you earlier, but I'm not too sure if we were recording, but the most amazing experience for me was finally being able to get out of Quarter Bridge and just go through the gears and over the start and finish line flat out in 6th gear and just keep it pinned all the way to Quarter Bridge.
Our governors.
Yeah, governors, there you go. And then that for me was just insane. And so being able to do that flat out in the bottom of Bray Hill, probably Bray Hill. Yeah.
Is it as steep as you remember? Because every time I go down it, I'm so like, steep. Oh my God.
It's unbelievable. It's a proper, when you do it, it's a right roller coaster, because it's unbelievable. It's a real roller coaster. The fastest roller coaster you'll ever do, yeah.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
And the final question, you may have one, you may not, but what's your best hire car story?
Well, from my adventures, I remember my cameraman parking on a hill and forgetting to put it in gear, and the handbrake was off and it rolled down the hill. Yeah, I've been pretty good in hire cars, to be truthful, because
I figured you might be, because you've had your dad with you a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And I never had budget for hire cars, really.
That's why I said you may have one, or you may not.
I've got a good story with Anthony Gilbert in a taxi, but maybe that's
Go
not
for it.
quite. Yeah. Okay. Well, we were.
Bless him. This is tribute to
Yeah.
Anthony Gilbert.
Honestly, I was a fan of Gilbert because he was a good dude, man. He was just troubled. You know, he had a bit of a troubled past, But he was wild. He could ride a bike like a man possessed, and he could party like I'd never seen anybody party. And anyway, we were being out one night, and we were between Grand Prix, and I was with Jürgen van der Gorberg, and we parked up in this fairly cheap campsite, but it was near the beach. And then Gerbert was in some fancy car park campsite down the road with Kirk McCarthy.
Yeah, bless him.
And I can't remember if Darrell Beattie was there, but anyway, there was the Australians like to hang out together, and they were down there. Anyway, we went out for a night out, and Gerbert had gone wild, and we were on our way back to the campsite, and we were going to get dropped off first, and then he was going further down the road, and we got in this taxi, and this old man's driving. And he's third, fourth, just driving down the road, and Gerbert just grabs his eyes like that and pulls him at the back of the seat. This poor man, like coming to a stop. We're all laughing because it was pretty funny. Not for the taxi driver, but for us all in the car, it was pretty funny. And then he wanted to kick us out, but he didn't. And then he's off again. First, like this. now he's not trusting any of us. And he literally gets up into like third gear. And the minute you go into third gear, Gerbert's again. Yeah, so we did that all the way back to the campsite until we got kicked out. But I didn't wreck any hire cars, thankfully. I was quite a good boy. But yeah, I've heard of a lot of stories of other people wrecking hire cars. But yeah, I spent too much time probably traveling with my dad. My dad kept me in the. I can only imagine how many hire cars I would have. But we were mainly traveling to races. We weren't flying and getting hire cars.
You're in your own van and everything.
We were driving to everything. Doing it the real way. So, but we definitely had a few moments. I remember coming out of a track, Harama, in fact, and we were driving home, and the freeway or the motorway was all coned. And what they were doing as they were coming into Madrid, they made, because there were so many cars coming into Madrid, they made one of the lanes come onto the other carriageway.
Okay, like contraflow job.
Yeah. Anyway, we came out of Harama, and there was these cones, and there's this thing going everywhere. And I said to my dad, "You're in the wrong lane. You're in the wrong lane." So my dad jumped into the other lane, and then we nearly had a head-on collision, and then pulled over by the police. And my dad getting a right bollocking, and my dad was pretty pissed at me for that. Dear, but it was pretty good. I had a lot of fond memories of riding around Europe with my dad, and yeah, luckily we didn't go to jail.
Still here to tell the tale. That's the thing.
Yeah.
This has been absolutely brilliant. I wish you every success with what's to come for Jim Rumser, for the family back over in LA as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
And mate,
I've got that over there, which is so different than what I was brought up with here. It's chalk and cheese.
I can't imagine. I see the view that you've been brought up with through the valley.
Yeah, I'm very lucky.
It's stunning. And now you have a different life over there with your beautiful wife, your son, and everything is moving on for you there. So I wish you continued success, mate. And thank you so much for doing this, mate. What an absolute pleasure.
Awesome.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jamie Robinson. Thanks.